I walked into that party thinking the hardest part of the night would be pretending to enjoy another couple's gathering. By sunrise, my wife would have destroyed my confidence in front of 20 people, admitted she believed she had married the wrong man, and then begged me to come home after discovering that someone had recorded everything. What she saw online changed her completely, but by then, I was already questioning whether our marriage could survive. My name is Perry, and before that night, I never thought of myself as an unlucky man. I worked in IT, made a comfortable living, paid my share of the bills, and tried to be a reliable husband. My wife, Isabel, was different from me in almost every obvious way. She was beautiful, outgoing, stylish, and confident. People had questioned our relationship before, but Isabel always made me believe she had chosen me for reasons that mattered. The party was at the home of our friends Nadia and Wesley, and Isabel had been looking forward to it for weeks. Around 20 couples were there, drinking, talking, dancing, and laughing in different rooms. I started the evening beside Wesley, discussing work while Isabel moved through the crowd with a glass of wine. Everything felt normal until the drinks started flowing and the conversations became more personal. That was when I heard Nadia call everyone toward the living room. Apparently, Isabel had been telling stories about our marriage, and everyone wanted to hear more. I walked over expecting some harmless embarrassing story about something I had done at home. Instead, Isabel looked directly at me with a smile that should have warned me. She told everyone she had been discussing the secret to a successful relationship, then casually turned the conversation toward our private life. Within seconds, I realized exactly where she was going. She began making jokes about my performance in bed. At first, I tried to laugh, because I thought she would eventually realize how uncomfortable I was. She did not. Isabel told the group that I was too quick, that I had searched online for ways to improve, and that none of it helped. People laughed nervously, but she seemed encouraged by every reaction. Then she started describing our private moments in enough detail that there was no pretending this was an innocent joke anymore. I could feel my face burning as I looked around the room. My best friend was there. People I worked with were there. Friends we saw regularly were there. Even members of Isabel's family were within hearing distance. She had taken something that belonged only between husband and wife and placed it in the middle of a crowded room. Then she compared my appearance to the performance she claimed I could not deliver, and the laughter around us suddenly felt like something I could physically feel. I finally told her to stop. My voice was controlled, but I could hear the anger underneath it. Isabel looked surprised, almost offended that I had interrupted her performance. I told her that she had gone too far and that I was leaving the room. As I walked toward the balcony, I heard someone whisper my name sympathetically behind me. Then I heard Isabel laugh. That laugh followed me outside, and I knew something between us had just broken. I stood alone on the balcony for several minutes, trying to understand what had happened. I was not thinking about whether her jokes were true. I was thinking about why someone who claimed to love me could enjoy watching me feel ashamed. When Isabel eventually came outside, she acted as if I had ruined the mood by taking everything seriously. The ride home was even worse, because she still seemed convinced that I was the problem. She told me it was only a joke and that everyone had laughed. I asked her how she could possibly think public humiliation was funny when the subject was something so private. She became irritated and told me I was being dramatic. That was when I finally asked the question I had been afraid to ask. I wanted to know whether she actually believed the things she had said. Her answer was not angry. It was calm, and that made it hurt even more. Isabel told me I was average at almost everything. She said I was not particularly attractive, not as successful as I thought I was, and not the husband she really wanted. Then she admitted that she had spent 5 years pretending to be happy because she believed she had married the wrong person. I kept driving while those words settled over me. The humiliation at the party suddenly seemed small compared with the realization that my wife had apparently been carrying this resentment for years. When we reached home, Isabel went straight upstairs and locked the bedroom door. I stayed downstairs for a while, staring at the dark living room and wondering how I had missed so much. Eventually, I booked a hotel and left. The next morning, my phone was filled with messages from her. Most were apologies, but one message stood out. She told me she had discovered something about the party and needed me to see it with my own eyes. I went home around 10 in the morning. Isabel was waiting for me at the door, and I almost did not recognize her. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hair was messy, and she looked exhausted. She silently led me to the living room and handed me her phone. There was a video playing on the screen. Someone had recorded the conversation from the party. But the video itself was not what had frightened her. It was where that video had ended up. Someone had posted it inside a huge relationship discussion group with hundreds of women. The comments were the opposite of what Isabel had expected. Nobody was laughing at me. Instead, people were condemning her behavior and asking why anyone would expose their husband's private life for attention. More comments appeared every minute. Some called her cruel. Others described the behavior as emotional abuse. Isabel kept scrolling, and with every comment, her expression changed. Then she showed me that the video had spread beyond that first group. It had appeared in other relationship communities and discussion pages. Strangers were identifying Isabel from the clothing and background in the recording and sharing their opinions about what they had seen. The internet had turned against the person who thought she was telling a funny story. And for the first time, Isabel was experiencing something I had felt the night before. She was being watched, judged, and discussed by people she did not know. I asked her why she was showing me all of this. She sat down and started crying again. Isabel admitted that she had never expected anyone to record her. She thought the party would end, everyone would forget, and I would eventually laugh about it. But seeing the video through the eyes of strangers forced her to confront what she had actually done. She finally understood that the problem was not my reaction. The problem was her decision to hurt me. Then came the confession I never expected. Isabel said she had been angry with me because she felt insignificant beside me. She believed I had a stable life, a respectable career, and an easier path than she had. Instead of confronting her insecurity, she had turned that resentment toward the person closest to her. She admitted that she had been looking for ways to make herself feel superior, and humiliating me had temporarily made her feel powerful. Hearing that explanation did not erase the pain, but it finally made the pattern visible. Isabel told me she had contacted a therapist that morning. The therapist had explained that insecurity could explain harmful behavior, but it could never excuse it. She had been emotionally abusing me, even if she had convinced herself that certain comments were only jokes. That was the moment I realized something important. I could understand why Isabel had become this way without accepting what she had done to me. Understanding and forgiveness were not the same thing. I moved out for 2 weeks. I needed distance, because I could not simply hear an apology and pretend the damage was gone. Isabel began individual therapy twice a week, and eventually we started couples counseling. Those sessions were not easy. There were days when I cried. There were days when Isabel admitted things she had never said before. We discovered that our marriage had been built partly on avoiding difficult conversations, and every ignored insult had allowed resentment to grow stronger. I also had to admit my own mistake. I had noticed the small comments long before that party, but I kept dismissing them because confronting Isabel felt harder than pretending everything was fine. I thought being patient meant absorbing the insults. It did not. I learned that love without boundaries can become permission for someone else to keep hurting you. Isabel had to change, but I also had to stop making it easy for her to hurt me. Over the following months, the video slowly disappeared from public attention as the internet moved on to another story. Isabel never forgot what it felt like to become the person everyone was judging. She also never forgot the lesson behind it. She stopped using alcohol as an excuse, continued therapy, and started confronting the insecurity that had fueled her anger. I worked on rebuilding my confidence and learning to separate my own worth from the opinions of the person who had hurt me. 6 months later, Isabel and I were still together, but our marriage looked completely different. I understood why my friends and family had told me to leave, and I knew they were trying to protect me. But relationships are not always simple enough to solve with one sentence. Isabel had taken responsibility, committed to therapy, and continued doing the work long after the attention disappeared. Staying was my decision, just as leaving would have been my decision if she had refused to change. Even now, I sometimes remember that balcony and the sound of Isabel laughing behind me. I remember how small I felt when she exposed something private, and how close I came to believing her cruel words described my actual worth. They did not. The biggest lesson I carried from that night was that someone else's insecurity is never permission to destroy your confidence. You can understand a person's pain without volunteering to become the target of it. I also learned that being drunk does not transform someone into a completely different person. Alcohol may remove restraint, but responsibility remains. If someone repeatedly humiliates you, insults you, or makes you feel worthless, calling it a joke does not change what it is. And if a relationship requires you to constantly walk on eggshells, constantly prove your worth, or constantly tolerate disrespect to keep the peace, something is already broken. Our marriage survived, but survival was never the real victory. The real victory was finally understanding that love requires honesty, accountability, boundaries, and two people willing to change. Isabel could not change because I begged her to. I could not heal simply because she apologized. We both had to decide what kind of people we wanted to become after that night. And if there is one thing I will never forget, it is this: your partner's cruelty may reveal their pain, but it never defines your worth. If this story hit home, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe for more.